So I'm about to do the demo for Chapter 2 of CCNA 3, so which the topics are mostly about VTP, VLAN trunking protocol. There's also DTP, which is dynamic trunking protocol, and we're also going to look briefly at inter-VLAN routing using a multi-layer switch. So that's what we're doing for this chapter. So first, we're going to play around with this setup on the left. And so we've got a router doing inter-VLAN routing. As you can see there, it's already been set up. It was set up using these commands. These commands here. All right, so from there, the switches have got nothing done. And so we've got to actually set up the VLANs. We've got to set up VTP. So the core switch, we'll use that as a server, can actually advertise the VLANs to the other switches. And so we'll look at the setup on here. And so to play around with VTP, you need to set its mode. Server mode is actually the default mode, but it's always a good idea to make sure it is the correct mode. And then VTP domain name, we're just going to call it Flinders for the hell of it. And we'll also set a password just so that, you know, Cisco 12345 is not a secure password, but it's just an example, and of course, normally a good idea. So that will set up the core switch to be a VTP server, and then we need to actually define the VLANs. So VLAN 10, 20, and 30, and then name sales, marketing, and accounting as an unimaginative names. Anyway. And so, of course, it's VLAN trunking protocol, so we actually need to have some trunk ports for it to work. And so I'm just going to set up this core switch with the two first Ethernet, fast Ethernet ports to be trunks, manually put in trunk mode, and also the 2 gigabit ports to be put in trunk mode as well. One of them, of course, needs to be trunk to be able to communicate with the inter-VLAN switching. And so let's have a look at the switch. Oops. Don't know what I pasted then, but anyway. So Ian, let's do a show VLAN. And at the moment, we've just got VLAN 1, of course, and all the ports are members of it. So it's basically the default settings at the moment. So we'll go for this, copy, and paste it in and make sure we don't get any errors. Okay, so as you can see, we've done VTP mode server, and so device mode already VTP server, so it is the default anyway. And so we're going to change the domain name to Flinders, and so it was null, now it's Flinders, and we've set the password to be Cisco 12345. All right, now we create the 3 VLANs, VLAN 10, 20, and 30, and their sales, marketing, and accounting. And then we'll do the interface ranges for fast Ethernet 1 and 2, do switch port mode trunk, and G0, 1, and 2 with the same. So that's pretty much it for that switch. And so if we do show VLAN now, you can see that the VLANs have been created. As you can see, the links have actually gone into spanning tree mode, but if we fast forward that, because of auto negotiation, these are actually probably trunk links already. But of course, and so yeah, port 1, as you can see, doesn't have a VLAN beside it, fast Ethernet 1, which of course is what's there. And so that's already set itself up. So what do we need to do on the first client? So we might as well go into it, have a look. And show VLAN. And so this should be the default settings again, which it is. VLAN 1 is the only one that's been defined, and all the ports are members, except fast Ethernet 1, which is a trunk port because it's auto-negotiated, which we will talk about a little later. Now, client setup. So, of course, we need to set the mode to be client as opposed to server. We need to make it a member of the domain. And we need to set the password. So of course we need to set up the ports to be trunk ports. And I'm just being lazy here, just because, yeah, it only needs one port, but the other ports aren't in use anyway. So let's paste that in. And so as you can see, the other one said it was already in server mode, while this one it says it's been set into client mode. We've changed the name from null to Flinders, and we've got the password in. We've got the trunk port up as well, and away we roll. Let's just do a show VLAN, see what happens. And so, as you can see, the VLANs 10, 20, and 30 have been created. No ports or members yet, but that's actually the next step to do. So we'll port 10 is going to be is VLAN 10, port 20 is going to be VLAN 20, and we don't have a port 30, so it's port 24 is going to be VLAN 30. So we'll do that as well. Paste. And as you can see, it's in spanning tree mode at the moment, but once we fast forward through that, that should all be good. Now, we've got VLANs all the way up to here. Now, we haven't done this one yet, but what I probably should do is show VLAN. As you can see now, we've got those ports that are members of those 3 VLANs we created. And I suppose we could also do show DTP status we haven't looked at yet. And so you'll notice that because we're doing on this switch, it's a client mode and it's configuration revision 6. And so the reason for that is we go back up to here. As soon as you create a VLAN, that's a revision. You name it, that's another revision. So we've created 3 VLANs and three names, and so that's why it's revision 6. We've made 6 changes. And so from there, it seems to know everything it needs to know. So that is a good working switch. All right, now let's have a look at the host. And so this is 1010 because it's on VLAN 10, and I won't be able to ping across to those. I'll try, but it shouldn't work because this one doesn't have any VLAN ports in those VLANs yet. But I should be able to ping 3030 and 2020. So let's have a go at that. So desktop, of course, this one is 1010. So let's open that up. So ping 192.168.10. No, I'll ping myself. That's a little trivial, but anyway. Now 11 is on the other side. That should not work. Yeah, 1011 is there. That shouldn't work. Did I put a 0 in again? Anyway. So that's not successful. Takes a bit longer, doesn't it? Because it waits around. Anyway. So that's on the same VLAN and I can't ping it. So let's do 20.20. That should work. Maybe an ARP request in there here and there just to take a bit more time. And so of course 3030 should work as well. Again, probably another ARP request. But apart from that, all successful. And so we'll go through the same process on the other switch as well. So again, I suppose we could do show VTP status before we've changed anything. Oh, it's learnt the domain dynamically, but it hasn't learnt the password. Configuration revision of 0, so it's not entirely happy yet. But it's figured out that there is Flinders getting around. Okay, so let's throw the settings in for this. So client. Let's do that show VTP status again. So it's got client mode. If we do show VLAN, should be there. Not on this one yet. Show VLAN, and it's learned the 3 VLANs, so that's good. Now let's assign some ports. Again, 10, 20, and 24 are going to be in VLANs 10, 20, and 30. And so, again, no errors. VLAN. And you can see now that the ports are members. And so those ones that failed previously should actually work now. Oh, wait a minute. Might have to fast forward time a bit. Hey, that's better. Now, so 10, 11 now works, and that was one that failed. Let's do 30, 31, which is the other one that hangs off of there. Again, ARP request, but after that, success. Let's have a look at the 2021, which is this one. Again, probably waiting for an ARP request. And then success. So we have VTP doing its job. Now, of course, with VTP, you've got to remember that it is certainly a nice functionality. It can ensure that you've got consistent information across your network as long as you set up the protocol to work properly. But it can only look at the old or the traditional mode VLAN, so 1005 or less, basically. So that is certainly a problem with that. All right, so we'll look at auto trunk negotiation. Now, it did happen previously when I set these 2 ports to be trunk mode on. The default setting for a port is actually dynamic and auto. And so basically, because this wanted it, and auto says, if you want it, I'll have it. And so that's why the trunk links went up. And so basically, what I'm going to do here is on the central switch, I'll turn off that manual setting of trunk mode, and then I'll start up the dynamic. And so dynamic desirable on fast Ethernet 1 going to switch 1, and I'll turn off the manual again, and I'll turn it on to auto mode going that way. So let's turn that on. Okay, I don't see any error messages. So we've got some negotiation going on by the looks of it. Fast forward, and it looks like it's working. These are still manually on, and so they will have actually, because that's manually on, that one's dynamic. Hey, cool, we'll do it. This one's manually on, that's one in auto, and so that will also turn on. So if we do show int trunk, it will show us all 3. And you've actually got all 3 settings going. And so fast Ethernet is in desirable mode. Well, 1 is in desirable mode, 2 is in auto mode, and the gigabit going to the router, of course, is what I did manually, so it's just on. And so all 3 are working, all very nice. Now, if we go down to this one, we do show int trunk. Of course, there's only 1 port, and that's manually on. So let's do this one next. And we'll have this one as having both ports as desirable. And so because this port's desirable and this port's desirable, it should work. And so just fast forward time. Go back to it. Let's do that show int trunk. And now it's in desirable mode. It was in on before. Now here, the last option, I was going to set both ports to auto. Now this actually should present a problem, because I've set this one to auto. If I set this one to auto, well, neither of them don't care if it starts, and so it won't start. And so fast forward time, and if we do show int trunk, we've got none. And this one, remember, if we looked at it before, we had 3 ports. This will be down to 2 ports, because these are both auto, and if you remember the table from the curriculum, is if they're both on auto, they don't want it. They don't want it. They'll only want it if the other end wants it, and they're both auto, so they don't. And so that is not working. And so if we just hover over here, that port is now going to be VLAN 1. And so what we need to do to fix that, we could probably make both ports dynamic on one of the ends. I'm just going to use this end because I can. So fast forward. And show interface trunk again. So now, because they're both desirable, we're back to 3 trunk ports on this switch. So that's got it working again. All right, so that's dynamic trunking protocol. Now, of course, you've probably noticed that I personally prefer doing things in a static mode, switch port mode trunk. And so the reasons for that is all ports are actually on dynamic by default. And so if someone has a PC plugged in that's got some special software on it, it can actually pretend it's a switch, and it can actually negotiate a trunk link with the switch, and it will be able to see the traffic of multiple VLANs. And so there is a security hole. And so that's why doing it manually is probably best. Okay, so now we'll move over to this other setup on here. And so we're going to look at multi-layer switching. And so you'll notice I've just got this one switch here, as opposed to having a switch and a router. And so this will actually do the job of both of those. And also, if when I was pinging between the VLANs, the packets were going up to the router and then back down to whichever other host. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 links it was crossing. Here, to do the same ping, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've actually cut down 2 links. And also, multi-layer switches are normally very fast. And so for inter-VLAN routing, a multi-layer switch is the most efficient way to do it. So let's have a look at the switch. Now this is a multi-layer switch. Let's have a look at this routing table. So show IP route. And you'll notice there's not a lot there. The only thing is it's saying I don't know who my default gateway is. And so by default, it's a switch. It wants to be a layer 2 switch. And so the way that we get it to be a layer 3 switch is to actually turn on a command called IP routing. Now, of course, I've got to define the VLANs on this switch as well. So 10 sales, marketing, and accounting, and I'll also turn on IP routing. And so I've created them, and I've done this IP routing command. So if I do show IP route, now that actually looks more like what we get from a router, doesn't it? Because that's what it is. Now that I've done this IP routing command. Now, how do we actually do inter-VLAN routing? So most of the time with the multi-layer switch is you actually create that interface VLAN 10, VLAN 20, and VLAN 30, and give it an IP address. And so this is much the same as what we've done previously, but with a layer 2 switch, you can give it an IP address, but it only will use one at a time because it is that's only used for remote access. That's the only purpose for it. So now it's an IP router. You need to have multiple interfaces, otherwise what's the point of the router? And so if we do that, notice we've got some messages coming up. If we do that, do show IP route. It's now got 3 routes in its routing table because I've defined the information. Now, the only other thing needed to do is make some trunk links. So basically, the 2 ports in use here are that's G01, G02. And so, yeah, this will finish the job. And so basically, I've gone into them. Now I've done this manually. Now with this switch, it was a little bit really not all that keen to go into manual trunk mode. So I actually had to turn off negotiation. I also had to tell it what type of tagging we were going to use on the VLANs, which is what it means by encapsulation. And so .1Q was actually the only option, but I had to set that before it would allow me to do it. And then I could do switch port mode trunk. And so that should be that. If we look at, if we do a show run, there's the configuration for the trunk ports, and here's the configuration for the VLAN interfaces. And yeah, that's it. Of course, in real life, you'd have a whole pile of other stuff in there as well, but I'm only demoing this. So let's try out this inter-VLAN routing. So again, from memory, the IP addresses are the same, 10, 10, 20, 20, 30, 30, and this is 10, 11, 20, 21, and 30, 31. So on here, desktop, command, ping itself, 2.168. 10.10. It's one on the same VLAN, but on the other side. 11.11 is over there. All right, let's do 2020. Again, we might have a heart request or two to wait for. But away we roll. And 2021. So 3030. Again, heart request, and then success, and then 3031. So we have a working multi-layer switch. It's not particularly tough. All right, so that should be that for the video. That was all I was planning on. And so I'll catch up again with you next week with demos from chapters 3 and 4. Have a nice week. See ya.